She was all heated about Brownback. Okay. And I was 14. I didn't know what the hell's going on, you know? And so she's talking to me about it all the time, you know. Y'all know Lynn, okay? So she says we need to do something. She wants to create something. So she put me to work, okay? And I remember sitting in the garage, moving stuff. I think at the time they were door hangers maybe. And we were like moving boxes. Man, she put me to work. But it was great. It was great because it showed me what was necessary to be successful in politics from day one, which is not just who you know or what you know, but how hard you're willing to work. And so that was a great lesson to start with. I'm a graduate of Wichita East High School. Fellow Blue Ace over here. That's what I'm talking about. And that's also part of how I got interested in politics. Of course, I went to school during the Gannon School Finance Plan. I graduated high school in 2014. I'm 29. And we didn't have enough desks in our classrooms. I remember we literally ran out of paper and had to do a paper drive. We didn't have enough teachers, and of course you watch the toll that takes on the teachers as they work to manage a classroom of 30 or 35 students. We were profoundly under-resourced, and there was no way to avoid the confrontation because my step-siblings went to Andover. Y'all know, just 15 minutes up the road. And so we'd sit over dinner and they would talk about the new Chromebooks they were going to get or the new chemistry lab that was being built. And I'd be thinking about the paper drive, you know. And so luckily I had people in my family who explained to me, this is why that happens. And there are things people are trying to do to change it. So it was with that background and hearing I would give her full credit. My grandmother just rage against the machine. And so I got very interested in politics. I moved to Topeka for Washburn to study political science because what better place to study government than the state capitol. And pretty quickly, I just fell in love with it. I had an internship in the Attorney General's office for a year and a half, back when Derek Schmidt was the Attorney General. And he was wonderful. I mean, I'll tell y'all, he was very pleasant and normal, you know. But it was a great work environment, and I learned a lot. But I thought I missed the policy part of the law and government. So I got an internship with Senator Anthony Hensley, the Senate Minority Leader, if anyone knows Senator Hensley. He represented Topeka, and he used to hold the 58th district seat as well. And I loved it. Oh my gosh, y'all, it was amazing. That was when Chris Kobach was Secretary of State. And I remember the thrill that we got putting out a press release that talked about how he wanted to strip 37,000 voters off the voter roll. Y'all may remember. And how it was the same size as all these different Kansas towns, right? And it was so thrilling. I thought, oh my gosh, how cool to synthesize down this problem and make it so people can really understand the impact that would have, you know, a whole town being stripped off the voter rolls. So that was lovely. Then I moved on to an internship with a lobbying firm that worked on education, behavioral health, and it was great to see from that side. You got to sit in committees. I don't know if y'all know this. On YouTube, you can watch a live stream of every single committee in the Kansas House and the Kansas Senate. And so if there's a bill you're interested in, you can watch the hearing from start to finish. You can see how the legislators respond in real time, who they bring to testify, what those people say. And so as a committee monitor in college, I would go in person and take notes and jot down and give it to my lobbyist boss. So all that experience made me just love it. Okay, and that's when I started to think I might be sick. And I thought, where do people go for mental health care when they're like me? And the answer was Washington. So I moved and I got my master's, and it was amazing. My mentor out there was Betsy Fisher Martin. She was the executive producer of Meet the Press. And she used to just, tear me to shreds, okay? I would write something and give it to her, and she would just pick it apart. I'd be up 10:30 at night on a Friday responding to her edits, you know. I'm sure all of us have had someone like that, and it is so constructive. It's awful in the moment, but I'm positive that helped to mold me into the critical thinker that is required to serve in the Kansas House now. So after I graduated in May of 2020 into COVID, So you can imagine that was depressing as shit. Okay. My treasurer, Ethel Edwards, would say, "Don't say that." But it's the truth, okay? It's a fact. It was very depressing. So, anyhow, fast forward, I ended up getting a lovely job working as the communications director in the Kansas House for the Democrats, and it was awesome. I don't know if y'all know Vic Miller. Yeah, I see some heads nodding. Vic is a real bulldog, okay? So Vic is a great mentor who was never afraid to do the right thing, which sounds so silly to say, right? But we see right now at all levels of government, it's not so easy to trust that your public officials will do the right thing. And he always would. And he was also the statewide property evaluations director for Kansas for a long time. So taught me a lot about everyone's favorite tax, the property tax. And then Tom Sawyer. We all know Tom. Yes, our tax guru. We are so fortunate to have him in the Kansas House. Nobody knows taxes like Tom Sawyer. And Henry Helgerson, yeah, he's like that with the budget. We might be small in numbers in the Kansas House, but we have some of the biggest minds, and the Republicans look to our members for leadership on issues of taxes and the budget. It might not influence their votes, but I'll tell you, when they cast that vote, they know what it's going to do. We don't leave them any room for ignorance, okay? So anyway, with all that said, it was my first year in the Kansas House, and it was also my first year working there with the numbers we have. So to lay out the landscape here, we have 37 Democrats of 125 members in the Kansas House, and 9 Democrats in the Kansas Senate of 40 total. Okay, so it's obviously, it can be a contentious environment, but it makes you rethink your wins, okay, because they are there. And if you lose sight of the wins, there's no point in showing up. So I'm going to talk to you today about some of the wins and also pathways forward. I'm going to start with SCR 1611, which I overheard y'all talking about. I think it's extremely important, and I understand we're all on the same page about that. This is the constitutional amendment. It's going to go on the ballot that would allow for the election of judges. And this, I think, my perspective is that that's a problem. Okay, we all saw what happened in Wisconsin. Obviously, we should not be electing our Supreme Court judges. That is, I was gavelled down for saying a bill was asinine, so I'm going to do it right now where no one can gavel me down. That is an asinine constitutional amendment. Vote no is the message across the board. But it's in conjunction. The threat is double whammy this year. It's not just the amendment. We have some campaign finance reforms that really changed how our campaign finance is going to look. So in the past, we have something called a party committee. We have a PAC, super PACs. You have all these different kinds of ways to funnel money in campaign finance, right? So the Republicans have been under investigation for illegal coordination for the last couple years, and
what does that mean?
Illegal coordination. So under state ethics laws, you are not allowed as a party committee. So the House Democrats, we have a party committee called Kansas for Democratic House. It's our PAC, essentially. And you're not allowed, under previous law, to coordinate with a PAC. Because, of course, there's a limit on party committee contributions. It's $5,000. There was no limit on a super PAC. So the party committee, there are ways to massage those rules, lots of loopholes, without getting too in the weeds. So anyhow, they're under investigation for illegal coordination, and they're mad about it, of course. So instead of just saying, we messed up, we crossed a line, they decided to change the law to allow for this coordination. And we had we had outstanding bipartisan opposition to these reforms. I went on a Kansas Reflector podcast with the former executive director of the Kansas Republican Party to talk about our shared concerns over these reforms. And ultimately, they passed the House with 72 votes, okay? But I'll tell you, most bills passed with 88 or 89, okay? So The 72 is a significant statement against these reforms. So I bring that up in the context of the constitutional amendment because it's going to allow for so much more direct spending than I think we would have otherwise seen. We saw how much money was in the abortion amendment, and I remember y'all were a huge part of that. It was amazing. I was so proud. Okay, I pulled over to take billboard photos many days, but I digress. So it's going to be the same style campaign. I'm positive we're going to see groups developed to do that. But I suspect the financing is going to look a little bit different. So that's something we should all be aware of from the other side in particular.
What was the number of that bill?
SCR 1611. Now, is there anything? That's one thing I really wanted to talk about because everyone's talking about the amendment. No one's talking about the campaign finance changes. They've also just decided to overhaul our campaign ethics office generally. In elections, campaign ethics are the rules that you are bound by. The limits on campaign contributions, how you can talk about your opponent, the ways you can talk about your opponent. There's so many rules. And again, because they got in trouble, they decided we're just going to change them altogether. We currently have no ethics director. And because he resigned after years of harassment from these people because of the investigation. I always felt he was very fair. I thought he was a great ethics director. I could call him up and say, Mr. Skoglund, is this allowed? We don't want to break any rules, but we don't know. And he would always be very helpful. So I said to the legislature, I don't think we should be passing ethics reforms without an ethics director who's going to be charged with enforcing these. Why would we not wait a year until we have someone? But that's too logical. Okay, that's my first year mistake. So is there anything anybody's particularly interested in outside of those two things? Yeah.
Tell us about your campaign.
Oh, okay. So I had a primary. My district is blue. I'm very safe in that I'm in a Democratic district, so I have a lot more freedom than so many people. But I did have a primary, and I'm glad I did. It was much more rewarding, and it made me work much harder than I would have. I knocked doors. If y'all don't already know this, and this will come in handy for the amendment too, knocking on doors, direct voter contact is the #1 most effective way to get out the vote. So literally 10 a.m. on Saturday, I would get up with my little list, okay, my little t-shirt on, and my palm cards is what we call them, and I would go knock doors, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of doors. And I think when I finished the cycle, I was at 2,200 or 2,300 doors, and that's nothing. I mean, there are candidates that in the really competitive seats, they get their teams of people. I mean, they're knocking out. Sometimes they make 2 or 3 passes through all their doors. Yeah.
How many people answer the door? How many people do you actually get to talk to?
It's more than you'd ever expect. I'm shocked, especially, that people come to the door when a stranger's there. And let's be honest, who opens the door and is excited to see a stranger who wants to talk about politics? Literally, nobody. Okay. But it reminds me of selling cookies for Girl Scouts, You just got to keep going. But no, it's very hard work, and I think people don't appreciate, especially when we're talking about candidate recruitment. Everyone says, oh, I want a Democrat on the ballot to vote for. You do, absolutely. But to find someone who has the time, if you have kids, can you give up, all weekend, every weekend, and every evening after work for months on end? No, not unless you have a very robust support network around you. And then the pay, the legislature, really, they upped the pay, but it's not much at all. So I know people talk about recruitment a lot. Is there in the Be the Bear Facebook group? It used to be, Kansas, Kamala Harris or something. I see people post about recruitment a lot in there, their frustration that we don't have more Democrats on the ballot. There are real logistical complications, and it's not for lack of effort. So it's a lot of fun. Campaigning's fun, but it's hard. But I won my primary with 85% of the vote. So I should be more humble than to say that, but I'm really proud of it. So, someone raise their hand.
You're in a Democratic district.
Yeah. Well, then I won the general with 65, and I was upset it wasn't more.
How much money did you have to spend?
Oh, even in my blue district, I spent probably $15,000.
15?
Yeah, I would say your average house district, you probably want to raise 25 or 30. If it's a more competitive seat, 50 or 60. In a perfect world, you're looking at 80 for one of those seats, but it's hard to raise money. So
How is this divvied out? I mean, what does it go for?
So, lots of stuff. Palm cards, materials. To buy 5,000 palm cards is close to, I want to say $700 or $800. Of course, depending on how big they are and things like that. Yard signs are very expensive. When candidates give you a yard sign, that's expensive. I bought 500 yard signs that I got at a fantastic price through a consultant friend, and it was still like $2,500 for average size signs. And that's a whole logistical nightmare getting those out. So if you find yourself to have an organized brain like that, volunteer it for a candidate like me who needs that assistance. Yeah.
Back to your knocking on the doors, how many of those meetings were contentious, did you say?
So for my race, not many, because I was trying to get out primary voters, so Democrats, and they were just excited that a Democrat was on the ballot. Okay, we're in Kansas. The bar is low. But in other districts, does everybody know Jason Probst?
Yes.
Yes, he's one of my dear friends, and I would go knock doors in his district. Let me tell you, that was a very different experience. His district, big Trump district, and so they know Jason too. He's a known quantity out there. So I would knock in my little Jason t-shirt, and they answer, and you ask what's important to you this year, and everybody, and I should have taken this as a sign of what was to come, everybody said Trump. That they needed Trump to win. That was their number one issue, was Trump winning. It wasn't the economy, it wasn't immigration, it was the man, not a policy.
It's a Hutchinson, huh?
Yeah. And so it was a very different experience. Yeah. But no, the libs are a lot more fun. But no, it was, in that way, it's very valuable. You learn a lot, right? And I tell my class, there's no better way to understand your own argument than to understand the other side just as well. Mm-hmm. And so as painful as those days are, and as frustrating as the conversations we might engage in too, with people we don't agree with, they're so valuable. Because then when we do things like talk about the constitutional amendment, we can say, do you want, the richest people in the state making these decisions or in the country for you? And they don't. Republican or Democrat, they don't. I will say that's one thing, and then I'll answer your question. But that's one thing I always want to make the point about. People don't appreciate, because our environment does not enable us to see it, the Republicans and Democrats in the legislature get along quite well, and there's a surprising amount of overlap. Of course, how that pans out in policymaking, different story. But human to human, it's a very valuable experience to be, you sit next to or next to somebody in committee, for example. You get to know them throughout the year. You might learn that their daughter's a special education teacher, grandson has autism, they just sold their family farm. You learn these things about people that really humanize them. And so then when you talk to them about policy issues, you can come at it from a much more relatable and applicable perspective than just, let me tell you how I feel. So it's so frustrating in this climate to do that. But someone I get along with very well, his name's Brett Fairchild. He makes the news every year for introducing the most radical abortion ban. And he's actually ranked the most conservative member in the Kansas House. But man, I'll tell you, Brett is a good friend in the workplace, okay? If I'm out of the chamber on the phone or something and we're about to vote, he'll send me a text, hey Alexis, we're about to vote, if you want to come back, Or we co-sponsored a legislation on no-knock warrants because we both believe the government should not be able to just barge in your home and shoot you because of some tip they got. We come at it from different perspectives, but we are both against that kind of government overreach. And we never would have found that in common if we, didn't sit by each other in committee and on the floor and just chit chat. So I find that to be really restorative to my soul at this point in time. And I hope you can maybe find some of that too, because it's so, it can feel so hopeless right now, right?